Tell me a lie. That was his first sentence. In 22 years of practice, I've heard thousands of people walk into this office and say thousands of different things. But this was a first. I don't understand, I said. He closed his eyes. Tell me this. Everything families do to their children is for their own good. Tell me that. Make it convincing. There was no anger in his voice, no pain, just emptiness, as if he'd misplaced his emotions somewhere and couldn't find them. When he opened his eyes, I noticed his eyelids were slightly swollen. He hadn't slept, maybe for days. I can't tell you that, I said. I know, he said. Nobody can anymore. Then he pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. It was a hospital record, but the date, 1987, he was 7 years old then. He didn't speak for the first half hour. He looked everywhere in the room, the ceiling, the floor, the painting on the wall, the window. He just didn't look at me. Then suddenly, he turned. Have you ever felt like your body betrayed you? He said. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I asked. He raised his arm, looked at his wrist. I can see my veins, he said. Blood flowing, heart beating, everything's working. But I'm not here somehow. He lowered his arm. My brother was in the hospital back then. I was 7. My mother was crying all the time. My father was silent. Then one day they took me into surgery. They said appendicitis. I remember, when I woke up, the left side of my stomach hurt so much. I thought it was strange. Isn't appendicitis on the right? I asked. There was a complication, they said. He paused, then he smiled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Complication. Interesting choice of words, isn't it? Some of my patients healed as they talked, but some stories, they never left my mind. Today, I'm going to tell you one of those lives. If you're listening to this and you have things you can't hold inside, share what's going through your mind and where you're listening from in the comments. I read every comment, I hear every story. If you want to stay updated on therapy stories, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If this story touches your feelings, you can support me by liking. I'd like to hear your story one day too. If you want me to share your story in my next video, you can send it to the email address in my profile. Remember, our stories heal, even a little, when they're shared. Before I tell you what happened to this man, I need you to understand something. There are violations we can see, bruises, scars, broken bones. And then there are violations that live inside the body, invisible, carried for decades without the person even knowing they exist. This is a story about the second kind. The man sitting across from me had gone to a routine doctor's appointment expecting nothing more than a prescription refill. What he got instead was a single question that would detonate his entire understanding of his own body. When did you have your kidney transplant? He hadn't, or so he thought. The medical records told a different story. 1987, nephrectomy, left kidney removed, patient age 7 years old, recipient his brother. And for 37 years, nobody had told him. But that's not the worst part. The worst part was what he found when he started asking questions. The lies weren't just about the surgery, they were woven into everything. Family dinners, holiday photos, bedtime stories. Every "I love you" now carried the weight of what they'd hidden. Every hug felt like a crime scene he hadn't known he was standing in. I watched him in that first session, the way his hand kept moving to his left side, fingers tracing a scar he'd been told was from a childhood bike accident. Even that had been a lie. The scar had its own false origin story, carefully constructed to prevent exactly this moment, the moment when he would finally know the truth. What happens to a person when they discover their body has been living a secret their mind never knew? When the people who were supposed to protect them were the ones who violated them. When love and betrayal become so tangled, you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. This is that story. And I promise you, by the time I'm done, you'll question everything you thought you knew about family, consent, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive. But before we get to how he confronted his family, before we get to the moment he looked his mother in the eye and asked her why, there's something you need to know about what that kidney meant. Because this wasn't just about an organ. This was about what happens when a child's body becomes a solution to a problem he never knew existed. His name was Marcus, 44 years old, software engineer, married for 12 years, 2 kids, Emma 9 and Lucas 6. On paper, his life looked like the American dream. 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, a golden retriever named Biscuit, weekend barbecues with neighbors who wave from their driveways. The kind of life that doesn't raise questions. Until a week ago, Marcus had scheduled a routine physical. His wife Jennifer had been nagging him about it for months. "You're not getting any younger," she'd said, half joking but fully serious. So he'd made the appointment, expecting nothing more dramatic than a lecture about his cholesterol and maybe a reminder to exercise more. His doctor was Dr. Rachel Kim, a woman in her 50s with efficient hands and kind eyes. She'd been his physician for 3 years, long enough to know his medical history, or what he thought was his medical history. The appointment started normally. Blood pressure, slightly elevated but nothing alarming. Weight, up 5 pounds from last year. She listened to his heart, checked his reflexes, asked about his stress levels. Then she turned to her computer to update his file, and everything changed. Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. Her eyebrows drew together. She clicked something, scrolled up, then down. Her expression shifted from routine to confused to something Marcus couldn't quite read. "Marcus," she said slowly, "I need to ask you something." When someone's reality is about to fracture, their body often knows before their mind does. I've seen it hundreds of times. That micro-expression of unease, the slight tensing of muscles, the unconscious lean backward, as if to physically distance oneself from incoming information. Marcus told me later that in that moment, sitting in Dr. Kim's office, his stomach had dropped. He didn't know why. He just knew something was wrong. Dr. Kim turned her screen toward him. On it was his medical history, going back years. But there was an entry he'd never seen before. An entry that shouldn't exist. "When did you have your kidney transplant?" she asked. Marcus stared at her. The question made no sense. "I didn't," he said. "I've never had any major surgery." Dr. Jel Kim's face told him she'd expected that answer, but that it didn't change what was on the screen. "According to your records, you had a nephrectomy in 1987. Left kidney removal. You were 7 years old." The room tilted. Marcus gripped the armrests of the chair. That's impossible. I would know if I had surgery. My parents would have told me. Would they?" Dr. Kim asked gently. It wasn't a rhetorical question. Marcus demanded to see the full record. What Dr. Pa Kim showed him next would destroy everything he thought he knew about his childhood, his family, and his own body. The file was detailed, clinical, cold, nephrectomy, it said. Performed at St. Mary's Hospital. Surgeon Dr. Howard Chen. Indication, living donor transplant. And then, the line that made his hand start shaking. Recipient, David M. Thompson. Relationship to donor, brother. David, his brother. 4 years older, his childhood hero. The person who taught him to ride a bike and throw a football. David had been sick as a kid. Marcus knew that. Kidney disease. In and out of hospitals throughout Marcus's early childhood. He remembered visiting David in sterile white rooms that smelled like antiseptic and fear. But he didn't remember this. He didn't remember giving David his kidney, because he hadn't given it. It had been taken. Medical trauma compounded by familial betrayal creates a unique psychological wound. Unlike other forms of trauma where the violation is clear and the perpetrators are external, this type of trauma involves the people who are supposed to be your primary attachment figures. The cognitive dissonance is severe. How do you reconcile love with violation? How do you hold space for both the gratitude that your brother is alive and the rage that your body was used without your consent? This internal conflict often leads to what we call moral injury, the deep psychological distress that occurs when your foundational beliefs about right and wrong are shattered by the actions of those you trust most. Marcus left Dr. Kim's office in a daze. He didn't remember driving home. He just remembers finding himself in his driveway, hands still on the steering wheel, engine off, staring at the house where his children were probably doing homework or watching TV or fighting over the remote. Normal life happening around him, while inside him everything was collapsing. He didn't tell Jennifer right away. He couldn't. How do you walk in your kitchen and say, "Hey honey, turns out I've been living with one kidney my whole life and my entire family lied about it"? So instead, he went upstairs, locked himself in the bathroom and pulled up his shirt. There on his left side was a scar he'd carried his entire life, about 4 inches long. Faded now, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. He told people, friends, girlfriends before Jennifer, even his own children, that it was from a bike accident when he was 7. His mother had told him that. You flew off your bike, she'd said, landed on a sharp rock, needed stitches. It had never occurred to him to question it. His fingers traced the scar now. This thin white line was his body's secret, the truth it had been holding for 37 years while his mind believed something else entirely. He looked at himself in the mirror. Really looked. Who was this person? This man with one kidney who'd never known? This man whose parents had cut him open and then created an elaborate fiction to cover it up? He didn't recognize himself. Identity is, in many ways, a story we tell ourselves about who we are. It's built from memories, relationships, beliefs about our own history. When a foundational piece of that story turns out to be false, the entire structure becomes unstable. This is what therapists call narrative disruption. The shattering of the coherent life story a person has constructed. Marcus wasn't just discovering a medical fact. He was experiencing an identity crisis. Every memory of his childhood now had to be re-examined, reinterpreted through the lens of this new information. The loving parents who tucked him in at night were the same people who'd authorized surgeons to remove his organ without his knowledge. How do you integrate those two realities? That night, Marcus made a phone call he'd been dreading. He needed answers, and there was only one person who might tell him the truth. His brother David. The phone rang 3 times. 4, 5. Marcus almost hung up. Then David answered. Marcus, hey man, what's up? It's late. Marcus's throat closed. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Finally, did you know? Silence on the other end, then quietly. Know what? Don't. Marcus's voice broke. Don't do that. Did you know about my kidney? The silence that followed told Marcus everything he needed to know. David had known. That was how Marcus ended up in my office 3 days later. He sat in the chair across from me, and for the first 12 minutes, he said nothing. Just sat there, breathing, hands clasped in his lap so tightly his knuckles were white. I've learned over the years that sometimes silence is its own form of communication. His body was screaming, even though his mouth was quiet. The rapid breathing, the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to the door, as if calculating an escape route. This is what unprocessed trauma looks like. The body is in fight or flight mode, but there's nothing to fight and nowhere to flee. So the nervous system just stays activated, locked in a state of high alert. Finally, I spoke. Marcus, you don't have to have the right words. You don't even have to have words at all. But I need you to know, you're safe here. Whatever you're feeling, it's allowed. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I saw something I'd seen before in other patients with similar trauma. A deep, bone-level exhaustion. The kind that comes from holding yourself together when everything inside you wants to fall apart. I don't know how to start, he whispered. Start anywhere, I said. There's no wrong place. Trauma often robs people of their narrative ability. The experience is so overwhelming, so outside the realm of normal processing, that the brain struggles to organize it into a coherent story. This is why trauma therapy often begins with simply creating a space where the person can try out different ways of telling what happened, not to get the story right, but to find a version they can live with. Marcus needed permission to be incoherent, contradictory, confused. He needed to know that his inability to articulate the enormity of what he was feeling wasn't a failure. It was a normal response to an abnormal situation. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled to his voicemail, and pressed play. His mother's voice filled my office, shaky, desperate, aged in a way that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Marcus, please. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please understand, we didn't have a choice. Your brother was dying. The doctor said you were a perfect match. You were healthy, strong. One kidney was all you needed to live a normal life. We thought we were giving you both a future. Please call me back. Please. He stopped the recording. She's called 17 times. I haven't answered once. What stops you from answering? I asked. I don't know what I'd say. I don't know if I'd scream or cry or just hang up, and I don't trust myself with any of those options. I nodded. Your mother says they didn't have a choice. What do you think about that? Marcus's jaw clenched. They had a choice. They chose David over me. They chose his life over my right to decide what happens to my own body. And then they chose to lie about it for 37 years. His voice rose. That's 3 choices. 3 times they could have done something different. You're right, I said simply. He looked surprised. Really? Really? They had choices. They made the ones they thought they could live with. But those choices had consequences, and you're the one paying the price. One of the most damaging aspects of this type of trauma is that the perpetrators often genuinely believe they acted out of love. Marcus's parents didn't see themselves as violating their son. They saw themselves as saving both their children. This makes the trauma harder to process because there's no clear villain, there's just terrible circumstances, and people who made choices that seemed impossible at the time. But good intentions don't erase harm. Love doesn't justify violation. And Marcus needed to hear that his anger was valid, even if his parents' fear had been real. Both things could be true simultaneously. There's something else, Marcus said, and his voice changed. Flatter, more distant. Something I haven't told anyone. Not Jennifer, not David, nobody. I waited. When I was in high school, I got really sick, kidney infection. Landed me in the hospital for a week. The doctors were confused because my symptoms didn't match what they expected. My kidney function was off. They ran all these tests, kept asking me if I had any family history of kidney disease. He paused. I said no, because I didn't know. And my parents, they were there the whole time. They listened to the doctors being confused, watched them run test after test, and they never said a word. They let the doctors treat me blind. This revelation hit different. It wasn't just about the initial surgery. It was about ongoing medical negligence. His parents' lie hadn't ended in 1987. It had continued for decades, actively putting him at risk. Do you know what that means? I asked gently. It means they cared more about keeping their secret than keeping me safe. This is where familial betrayal becomes truly insidious. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing pattern of choosing the lie over the person. Every time Marcus had a medical issue, every time he went to a doctor, his parents made the active choice to maintain the deception. This transforms the trauma from a past event into a continuous present reality. The betrayal isn't something that happened when he was 7. It's something that was happening constantly. In every moment they chose silence over truth. This creates what we call complex trauma, layered, repeated violations that compound over time. Marcus started coming to sessions twice a week. The work was slow, painful. Some days he could barely speak. Other days words poured out of him like a flood he couldn't stop. In our 3rd session, he brought the hospital records from 1987. He'd requested them after that first appointment with Dr. Kim. What he found was both clarifying and devastating. The records showed that David had been in end-stage renal failure. Without a transplant, he had maybe 6 months to live. The waiting list for a pediatric kidney was years long. When the doctors tested Marcus's compatibility, they found something remarkable. A 6-antigen match, almost perfect, the kind of match that happens maybe once in thousands of cases. The doctors told my parents it was like David and I were designed for each other, Marcus said, voice hollow. That's what my mom said when I finally talked to her. She said it was meant to be, that God had made us compatible for a reason. What do you think about that? I asked. I think it's a convenient way to avoid responsibility. Blame it on God, blame it on fate, blame it on anything except the choice they made to cut into a 7-year-old without his permission. But then Marcus found something in the records that changed everything. A notation from the hospital's ethics committee, dated 2 weeks before his surgery. The notation read, "Parental request for pediatric living donation reviewed. Committee recommends postponement until donor is of age to consent. Alternative treatments for recipient should be pursued." Marcus looked at me, and for the first time since he'd walked into my office, I saw pure rage in his eyes. They were told not to do it, he said. Medical professionals and ethics committee, people whose job it is to protect kids like me, they said no. Wait until he's older, let him choose. And my parents did it anyway. They found a different hospital, different doctors, and they did it anyway. This revelation recontextualized everything. His parents hadn't just made a desperate choice in an impossible situation. They'd actively overruled medical and ethical guidance. They'd shopped around until they found someone who would do what they wanted. The discovery of this ethics committee notation transformed Marcus's understanding of what happened. It removed the last possible excuse that his parents were simply following medical advice, doing what doctors told them was necessary. Instead, it revealed intentionality. They'd been told no, and they persisted anyway. This is what we call premeditated violation, not an impulsive act in a moment of desperation, but a planned, deliberate override of protective systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of harm. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. It means Marcus's parents knew they were crossing a line, knew there were people trying to stop them, and chose to proceed anyway. In our 5th session, Marcus told me about the conversation he'd finally had with David. They'd met at a coffee shop, neutral ground, public enough that neither of them could lose control completely. I asked him when he found out, Marcus said. When he learned that the kidney inside him was mine. What did he say? He said he was 18. Our parents sat him down after his high school graduation and told him the truth. They said he deserved to know. They made him promise never to tell me. Marcus's voice shook. For 26 years, every time David looked at me, he knew. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time he asked how I was feeling, he knew he was carrying part of me inside him, and he couldn't say anything. How did that make you feel? Like I lost my brother twice. Once when they took my kidney for him, and again when I found out he'd been lying to me for more than half my life. But then Marcus said something that surprised me. But I also understand why he didn't tell me. He was 18. Our parents had just told him this massive secret. They probably made it seem like telling me would destroy the family. He was a kid himself, carrying this impossible knowledge. Marcus looked at his hands. I'm angry at him, but I'm also angry for him, because they did to him what they did to me. They took away his choice. This is a crucial moment in Marcus's processing. He's beginning to see the systemic nature of the harm. His parents didn't just violate him, they violated David too, in a different way. They created a conspiracy of silence that trapped both brothers in different forms of powerlessness. This recognition doesn't erase Marcus's anger, but it complicates it in a productive way. He's moving from a simplistic victim-perpetrator model to a more nuanced understanding of how trauma ripples through family systems, creating multiple victims in different configurations. This complexity is actually a sign of healing. The ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously is a mark of psychological flexibility. Marcus and David met 3 more times after that first coffee shop conversation. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild something. Not the relationship they'd had before. That was gone, based as it was on false premises. But something new. Something more honest, even if it was also more painful. David cries every time we talk, Marcus told me. He keeps apologizing, saying he wishes he could give it back, that he'd rather die than have this between us. Do you believe him? Yes, which almost makes it worse, because if he means it, and I think he does, then he's been carrying this guilt for 26 years. That's not fair either. But the hardest conversation was still ahead of him. His mother had been calling, texting, leaving voicemails. Each message more desperate than the last. Marcus had been ignoring them all, until one day his daughter Emma asked a question that changed everything. Daddy, why won't you talk to Grandma anymore? 9 years old. Smart, observant. Missing nothing. Marcus had frozen. How do you explain this to a child? How do you say, because Grandma did something to my body when I was younger than you, and I'm still trying to figure out how to feel about it? He deflected. Said Grandma, and he were having a grown-up disagreement, that sometimes adults need space. Emma had nodded, but he could see she wasn't satisfied. She knew something bigger was happening. That night, Marcus told Jennifer everything. Not just the facts, the medical records, the ethics committee, David's knowledge, but how it felt. The disorientation, the rage, the grief for the childhood he thought he'd had, the terror that his own body was a stranger to him. Jennifer held him while he talked, didn't try to fix it, didn't offer platitudes, just listened. And when he finally stopped talking, voice hoarse and eyes dry because he still couldn't cry, she said something simple but profound. Your body is still yours. Even if someone else touched it without permission. even if part of it is somewhere else. What's left? It's yours, and I love every bit of it. Spousal support in trauma recovery cannot be underestimated. Jennifer's response here is textbook therapeutic presence. She validated his feelings without trying to minimize them. She offered connection without demands, and most importantly, she helped him reclaim ownership of his body through affirmation. For Marcus, who was struggling with a profound sense of bodily alienation, hearing his wife affirm that his body was still his, still lovable, still whole, even in its incompleteness, this was a crucial step toward reintegration. Trauma isolates, connection heals. Jennifer was offering him a lifeline back to embodiment. In our 8th session, Marcus told me he'd made a decision. I'm going to see my mother, he said. Tell me about that. I need answers only she can give, and I need... He paused, searching for words. I need to look her in the eye and tell her what she took from me. Not just the kidney, the trust, the truth, the right to know my own body. I need her to hear it, and then I need to decide if I can forgive her. That's incredibly brave. It doesn't feel brave, it feels necessary. Like if I don't do this, I'll be stuck here forever and I can't live like this. The visit was scheduled for the following Saturday. Marcus's mother lived 2 hours away, in the house where he'd grown up. The house where, somewhere in a box in the attic or a folder in a filing cabinet, there were probably photos of him at 7, thin hospital bracelet on his wrist, recovering from a surgery he didn't understand. The decision to confront is deeply personal and should never be pressured, but when a trauma survivor makes the autonomous choice to face their perpetrator, even when that perpetrator is a parent who acted from a place of desperation, it can be a powerful reclamation of agency. Marcus was choosing to enter a space of discomfort on his own terms. He was taking control of the narrative, deciding when and how to have the conversation. This is the opposite of what happened when he was 7. Then, choices were made about his body without his input. Now, he was making choices about his healing with full awareness and intention. Marcus drove to his mother's house alone. Jennifer had offered to come, but he declined. This was something he needed to do by himself. His mother answered the door on the first knock. She looked smaller than he remembered, older. Her hair had gone completely gray since his father's death 6 years ago. Her hands shook as she stepped back to let him in. They sat in the living room. The same living room where he played with action figures as a kid. The same couch where he'd watch Saturday morning cartoons. Everything was familiar and completely foreign at the same time. Thank you for coming, his mother said. Her voice was papery, thin. Marcus didn't respond. He just looked at her, waiting. She twisted her hands in her lap. I know you're angry. I know what we did was wrong. But Marcus, you have to understand. No, Marcus interrupted. I don't have to understand anything. You have to explain. You have to tell me why you thought it was okay to cut into my body without asking me. Why you lied about it for 37 years. Why you let doctors treat me blind. You have to explain all of it, and then I'll decide if I understand. His mother's eyes filled with tears. David was dying. I know. He was 11 years old and he was dying, and the doctors said we had months at most. The transplant list, there were dozens of children ahead of him. He wouldn't have made it. I know that too, Marcus said. His voice was steady, controlled. What I don't know is why you didn't wait. The ethics committee said to wait until I was old enough to choose. Why didn't you wait? His mother's face crumbled. Because we couldn't. David didn't have time. And you were so young, you wouldn't have understood. You would have been terrified. We thought we were protecting you. Protecting me. Marcus's laugh was bitter. You took my kidney, and you think you were protecting me? From the guilt, his mother cried out. If we'd asked you, if we'd explained that your brother was dying and only you could save him, what would that have done to you? You were 7 years old. If David had died and you'd said no, you would have carried that guilt your entire life. We couldn't do that to you. This is the terrible logic of protective violation. Marcus's mother genuinely believed she was shielding him from an impossible choice. In her mind, the guilt of knowing he could have saved his brother and chose not to would be worse than the violation of having the choice made for him. It's a form of moral calculus that prioritizes one type of harm over another. But it's flawed because it assumes the child can't handle difficult truths, can't grow into understanding, can't be trusted with autonomy, even in the face of tragedy. It's paternalism taken to its most extreme, the complete erasure of the child's agency in service of protecting them from their own potential feelings. Marcus stood up. He couldn't sit anymore. He paced to the window, looked out at the backyard where he used to play. "You didn't protect me from guilt," he said quietly. "You just delayed it, because now I feel guilty anyway. Guilty that I'm angry David's alive. Guilty that part of me wishes he'd died instead of this. Guilty that I can't forgive you. You didn't save me from anything. You just made it worse." His mother sobbed. I'm so sorry. If I could go back. But you can't." Marcus turned to face her. "You can't go back. And I can't get those 37 years of truth back. I can't get back all the times I went to doctors and they couldn't figure out why my symptoms were weird because I didn't know to tell them I had one kidney. I can't get back my trust in my own family. I can't get back the person I was before I knew." "I know, do you?" Marcus's voice rose. "Do you know what it feels like to look at your own body and not recognize it? To touch a scar and realize it's been lying to you your whole life? To not know which memories are real and which ones you invented based on the stories you were told?" His mother couldn't answer. She just cried, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. Marcus watched her cry and felt nothing, not satisfaction, not forgiveness, just a vast, empty exhaustion. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said finally. "I don't know if I want to, but I needed you to hear this. I needed you to know what you did to me, and I need you to know that our relationship will never be what it was. Because what it was based on a lie." His mother looked up at him, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Are you gonna tell Emma and Lucas about what I did?" Marcus hadn't thought about that. His children, who loved their grandmother, who spent weekends baking cookies with her and listening to her stories. What would he tell them? "I don't know," he said honestly. "I haven't decided, but if I do tell them, I'll tell them the truth. Because that's what you should have done with me." He left then, walked out of the house, got in his car, and drove. He didn't go home. He drove to a park, sat on a bench, and finally, he cried. Big, gulping sobs that shook his whole body. Crying for the 7-year-old who'd woken up from surgery believing a lie. Crying for the 44-year-old who'd discovered the truth too late. Crying for the relationship with his mother that was now irreparably broken. Crying for everything he'd lost and everything he'd never had. This delayed emotional release is common in trauma processing. Marcus had been holding himself together through sheer will, managing his affect in order to function, to go to work, to be present for his family, to have difficult conversations. But eventually, the dam breaks, and when it does, the grief that pours out is for more than just the immediate harm. It's for all the adjacent losses, the innocence, the trust, the family dynamics that can never be restored. This kind of crying isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. It's the body finally releasing what the mind has been trying to process, and it's a necessary part of healing. Marcus came to our next session looking different. Lighter somehow. Still sad, still processing, but not carrying the same crushing weight. "I made some decisions," he said. "Tell me." "First, I went to see a nephrologist, got a full workup, kidney function tests, imaging, the whole thing. I needed to know the actual state of my body, not the story I'd been told, or the fears I'd imagined. And my remaining kidney is healthy, functioning well. The doctors say I'm in good shape, all things considered." She also said, "I should have been monitored my whole life, that not knowing was dangerous. But from this point forward, I know what to watch for. I know what symptoms to pay attention to. I'm taking control of my medical care in a way I never could before, because I didn't have all the information." This was significant progress. He was moving from victimhood to agency, from passivity to active participation in his own health. "Second," Marcus continued, "I talked to Jennifer about what to tell the kids. We decided on age-appropriate honesty. We told them that Grandma made a medical decision about my body when I was little that she should have waited to make. That I'm working through some big feelings about it. That we still love Grandma, but sometimes people we love make mistakes that hurt us, and we need time to heal." How did they respond? Emma asked if Grandma said sorry. I told her yes. Then she asked if I forgave her. I said not yet, but maybe someday. Emma nodded like that made perfect sense to her. Marcus smiled slightly. Kids are more resilient than we think. She didn't need all the details. She just needed to know that feelings are complicated, and that's okay. Teaching children that relationships can hold both love and hurt, both connection and boundary, both forgiveness and accountability. This is one of the most valuable lessons Marcus can pass down. By modeling complex emotional processing for his children, he's breaking the cycle of secrecy and false simplicity that characterized his own childhood. Emma and Lucas are learning that you can love someone and still need space from them. That forgiveness isn't automatic or required. That adults don't have all the answers. These lessons will serve them well throughout their lives. Third, Marcus said, I started a support group for people who've had medical procedures done without proper consent. There are more of us than I thought. Different circumstances, different stories, but the same core violation. Someone else made irreversible decisions about our bodies. How does it feel to be with others who understand? Lonely in a different way. Because I'm not alone anymore, but I see how common this is. How many people carry these secret wounds, but also powerful. We're reclaiming our stories. We're refusing to let shame silence us. This movement from isolated suffering to collective advocacy is one of the most healing trajectories I've witnessed. Marcus was transforming his pain into purpose. Our last session was 3 months after his first appointment with Dr. Kim. 3 months since his world had fractured and he'd begun the slow, painful work of putting it back together in a new configuration. I wanted to show you something, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. He opened a document, a letter he'd written, but not sent. It's to my 7-year-old self, he explained, my therapist assignment to myself. He read it aloud. Dear Marcus, you're 7 years old right now, and you're about to have surgery. They're going to tell you it's for appendicitis. That's not true. I want you to know the truth, even though you won't remember this letter, because it exists 37 years in your future. They're going to take your kidney. They're going to give it to David, and they're not going to tell you. I wish I could stop it. I wish I could reach back through time and tell Mom and Dad to wait, to ask you to let you grow up knowing the truth about your own body. But I can't. What I can do is tell you this. It's not your fault. None of it. Not the surgery, not the lie, not the broken trust. You are not responsible for the choices adults made about your body. You're going to grow up confused sometimes. Your body is going to feel different in ways you can't explain. You're going to have medical issues that don't quite make sense, and you're not going to know why. But you're going to survive. You're going to grow up. You're going to fall in love, get married, have 2 beautiful kids. You're going to build a good life, and one day you're going to find out the truth. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt so much, you'll think you can't survive it. But you will. You'll survive this too. You're stronger than you know. Your body is more resilient than you can imagine. And your heart, even after it breaks, even after it learns that the people who were supposed to protect you violated you instead, your heart will find a way to keep loving. Not the same way. Not with the same innocence. But love isn't about innocence. It's about choosing connection, even when you know connection can hurt. I'm proud of you. The you that is 7 and scared. The you that is 44 and shattered. All the yous in between. I'm proud of us. We survived, and we're gonna keep surviving. With love, Marcus, at 44. When he finished reading, there were tears on his face, but his voice was steady. I can't change what happened, he said. I can't get back what was taken, but I can decide who I want to be on the other side of this. And I choose to be someone who survived, someone who tells the truth, someone who breaks the cycle. This letter represents what we call narrative integration, the ability to hold the past and present in the same frame, to speak across time to wounded parts of yourself, to offer the compassion that wasn't available then. Marcus is no longer fragmented into the child who was violated and the adult who discovered it. He's becoming a unified self who can acknowledge both experiences as part of a continuous, coherent story. This doesn't mean the pain is gone. It means the pain has meaning. And meaning in the face of senseless harm is its own form of healing. What comes next for you, I asked. Life, Marcus said simply. I go back to work. I take my kids to soccer practice. I have dinner with my wife. I see David sometimes. We're rebuilding slowly. I set boundaries with my mother. We talk occasionally, but I'm not ready for more than that, and maybe I never will be, and that's okay. And your body, how do you feel in it now? Marcus considered this. His hand went to his left side, fingers finding the scar, but this time the gesture looked different. Not searching, not aching. Just acknowledging. It's mine, he said. One kidney, one scar, one complicated history. But it's mine. Nobody gets to tell me what it is or isn't anymore. I decide that now. As he left my office for the last time, he paused at the door. Thank you, he said, for not telling me how to feel, for not rushing me to forgive, for just letting me be angry and sad and confused all at once. You did the work, I told him. I just held space for it. He nodded once, and then he was gone. After Marcus left, I sat in my office and thought about his case for a long time. About how families can commit profound violations in the name of love. About how secrets corrode everything they touch. About how the body keeps the score, even when the mind doesn't know there's a score to keep. Marcus will never get his kidney back. He'll never get those 37 years of truth back. The innocence of his childhood is permanently altered by the knowledge of what was done to him. But what he has now is something his parents tried to deny him. Choice. Agency. The power to decide how his story ends. He chose to confront. He chose to grieve. He chose to set boundaries. He chose to rebuild with David. He chose to tell his children age-appropriate truth. He chose to start a support group. He chose to forgive his body for carrying secrets. And he chose to keep living, even when living felt impossible. Those choices don't erase what happened, but they reclaim what was stolen, his autonomy, his voice, his right to define his own experience. That's not a happy ending. It's something more valuable than happiness. It's integration. It's survival with intention. It's the refusal to let violation be the final word. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. I hope this story has helped you see your own life, your emotions, or those around you in a different light. I hope this story has helped you understand yourself and others better. I'd really like to hear something about you in the comments, to get to know you and your story a little better. If you want to share what's going through your mind, you can write to the email address in my profile. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Click the bell icon to turn on notifications so you'll be informed about the next real-life story.